And welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we dig in deep to analyze the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. I'm Andy Nelson from thenextreel.com.
And I'm Pete Wright, also from The Next Reel.
We are looking at Jon Favreau's 2008 film Iron Man, and we're right at the very end of the actual film. And back with us again, Nick Exposito from Fantasy Flix League. Welcome back, Nick.
Hi, guys. Well, thanks for having me back again. I love being here.
We are thrilled to have you. And, this is a big one. On today's show, we're looking at minute 118 of Iron Man. The minute starts with Rhodey telling Tony to just stick to the cards. And it ends with the casting by credits. That's right. We are hitting the credits in this minute. And Nick, this is the minute that you had requested to be a part of. Why is that?
I just love this scene. I love how it's set up. I love how it ends. Again, Robert Downey Jr. just plays it perfectly. And it also sort of deviates itself from the comics. And, it's a while in Iron Man's history before he does reveal that he is Iron Man. And again, we've been talking about how this movie does things differently from typical superheroes. And this is one of those things where it just throws out that there's no more alter ego. There's no more hidden identity. He just comes out, he says it, people freak out, and the movie ends. It's a subversion to this genre up until this point that I think is just very interesting and makes it very fun.
It's a great change from comic book history, and the whole, as you kind of talked about, the whole idea of heroes keeping their secret identities safe. I mean, it's a very big thing, especially when you look at like Peter Parker and the dilemma. I mean, they bank on that all the time in the movies and the comics all the time about how do I tell Mary Jane that I'm both, and all of this sort of stuff. And I mean, they play it up so they can use it very much for dramatic purposes. But this was a big subversion, and it was great to see them do something different with it. What I think is funny, you say how everyone reacts so strongly as soon as, and we're talking, of course, specifically, Robert Downey Jr. has the most wonderful movie moment. I mean, this is probably just one of my favorite movie moments. It's so good. He's looking at his cards. He puts them down. He looks right into the camera and he says, "I am Iron Man." Which is just brilliant. What's funny is as soon as he says that, though, like the reporters go nuts. There are a few people that I want to talk about specifically. One is Leslie Bibb, is Christine Everhart. As we've already said, her reaction is so static. And I love it. Even as he says this, she doesn't move a muscle. She stays in the exact same position, almost like they did a freeze frame on her and rotoscoped her in as a still image. She is, like, I swear, a hair doesn't move. It's amazing how good she is in that moment.
I wonder what she's supposed to be thinking. Is she like shocked? Is she just like, I knew it?
Right.
Or how dare you?
I think she's thinking, what a dumbass. Like, another man puts on a suit to be famous.
Well, and that's funny because it does make you wonder, like, why was her whole line of questioning that we're talking about in yesterday's minute? Was she suspicious? Like this whole bodyguard thing, like she totally didn't seem like she bought into it. So it does make you wonder. It's like, was she expecting this? I don't know, because she doesn't give a smirk. There's nothing.
But you know who does actually have a reaction and write it down? Weirdly,
our favorite guy,
stoic financial reporter who is sitting right next to her, who now miraculously has a pad in his hands.
Maybe he was holding it between his knees, like he just kind of had it sitting there just in case, because he was really unimpressed with everything.
He was so unimpressed, right? This is news, people. This is news.
Yeah.
I'm telling you guys, Marvel Press Cinematic Universe, that's his power. He just, pad comes out of his hands.
Agents of the MCPU. I can't wait.
Ready to go.
The other person who really doesn't register much of a reaction at all, and I wonder if they had shot a shot of it or something, but you have Rhodey who's standing there next to Tony, and granted we're only looking at him from the back, but he notices the press and he just he casually turns to Tony, and I feel like he's reacting the same way he did when he came into the CAOC earlier in the film, like practically with a donut in his hand saying, "Oh, what's up, guys?" Like as they're chasing this bogey. Like his reaction is so overly casual here. It's like I almost just, what is this reaction of yours?
Do any of you guys know, was that improv or was that actually part of the script? Like, was that part of the plan all along?
From what I heard, Robert or Jon Favreau actually said that they had he loved the idea. This idea had actually come up beforehand, and he thought it was a great idea, and he thought it'd be fun to do. I think he said he loved the idea until he set out to make the sequel and realized how much harder he just made it on himself. But he said he still thought it was a really cool idea. But yeah, so I mean, they had the idea. I don't know what sparked that idea. I don't know why, but it is scripted that way. And I guess they actually told all the extras that were here that it's just a dream sequence because they didn't want it to be leaked as a surprise. And so so that was kind of how they got that to work.
Wow.
But very interesting.
Yeah. Because and so here's the script. Let me just read this because Christine Everhart is not in the script at all. It's a very abrupt ending, and I am not a fan. Tony walks out, takes the podium, puts a hand up to silence the bubbling questions. Tony: I've seen the papers. I've heard the reports. That's why I want to put an end to all this wild speculation. The truth is, he looks to Rhodey, to Pepper, to the crowd. I am Iron Man. The reporters erupt in a cacophony. We end on Tony's face. So it's very kind of abrupt, and it takes the fun out of it that we had with Christine. I think that they did a much better job here.
Well, they give him a chance to be awkward. And we I love, watching these last 2 minutes of Tony being awkward. Actually, 3 minutes, because we have the awkwardness between him and Pepper. Like, it's just one sequence after another of Tony potentially sticking his foot in his mouth. And this last line of the movie is him saying, you know what? I know who I am. I'm going to go ahead and take care of this and reclaim his identity. I think it's unreal. It's interesting because it communicates that he's a guy who is like, I'm not going to keep secrets. I'm not a secret keeping guy. He does also have a secret underground garage where he's testing all kinds of crazy equipment that with a giant padlock on his basement door that is super secret biometric. So there's that, but.
Except when it gets broken, and then he doesn't fix it,
it just
for
decides,
weeks and weeks. You can get in through the ceiling. You can get in through the broken
giant
glass.
Open garage door that is a garage runway that he has leading outside. Well, and so that really is what this scene is, right? Essentially, this is him saying I am Iron Man is the functional equivalent of him blasting out all of the doors on his basement.
Yeah, it's also very much it's like Tony Stark. He finds his swagger at the end because throughout this whole scene, as we discussed yesterday, and subsequently before that, how he's frumfering and kind of oh, how do I get out of this? And then he just kind of says, you know what, to hell with it, and just delivers the line with such confidence.
It's so good. It's so well done. And again, this is a moment of Robert Downey Jr. really owning this character. And I think this is another reason why casting Robert Downey Jr. is perfect, because he has that kind of a little bit of that arrogant swagger and that kind of cockiness that works so well. And so when you see him standing there and he's just like, I am Iron Man, and then he kind of looks at the camera and he gives that little smirk before you freeze on him, and kind of it turns into that kind of newspaper looking image, high contrast of dots. That swagger and that smirk and everything that he provides for this role is exactly what makes Iron Man so successful and him so successful in the role. And I think why the Marvel Cinematic Universe was born. I think this moment is a huge reason for that.
I agree 100%.
I just love it.
It's also, in the comic book reveal, because this is kind of an homage to that, because it's the same sort of setting. It's a press conference. He's talking about some incident that just happened. Although in the comic books, it's a little bit different. There was a chase or a shootout happening on the streets below, and a dog was going to get run over by a car, and Tony somehow noticed it, and he jumps out the window in his suit, his business suit, and then opens up a briefcase, and that's where the briefcase suit comes from, and he puts it on to save the dog, and the reporter or something is like, you revealed this by saving a dog? Was very perplexed. It's actually much better done in the movie, but that's how the reveal was done in the comic book.
That's awesome. So funny. And that was and just the context of that was, when was that? When did that comic come out? I'm trying to remember. It was.
I'm not sure. I don't know the issue number yet, but yeah, it was in the late 80s, early 90s, I believe.
I'm finding something here that says it was Iron Man Volume 3, number 55 out of 400 from July 2002. But maybe that's not right.
Oh, okay. No, that could be correct.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading something else here. Yeah, it might.
I know as far as, dates for me on the comics are a little fuzzy, but it was fairly recently.
Yeah. He saves this dog from this kid. Everyone sees it. And it occurs. Yep, that's when it is. July 2002. Interesting.
Yeah, I had a feeling that, I was debating whether it was like early 90s because the art style looks very interesting when I kind of went back and looked at it. It definitely invokes that feel. But I also, Civil War and a lot of those storylines were happening in the comic books around that time. And I seem to remember that could be that identity revealing was tied into that comic book arc somehow. So
they definitely had to set that up. It was like Civil War was 2006.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing I thought of as I went back to rewatch this, was how astute it was that they open with this change in this character to peel off his identity in the first movie. It sets the table for them to really handle the iconic identity issues over the next 6 or 7 movies, which they ended up doing.
Yeah.
Like that ends up being really prophetic change.
Well, one thing I really like, I do like about this scene, and why I wanted to talk about it, is it also, because of this reveal, it combines sort of two comic book worlds at that point. Like, because when you watch a comic book movie, as a comic book fan, you're always, okay, what storyline are they going to follow, or how are they going to do this part about the character, or this like story beat? And in this moment, it sort of it sets the tone that they're going to take the modern approach with Tony Stark, but obviously pull in some things from his past. But also at the same time, during that whole Marvel era of Civil War and everything, there was another comic book line called The Ultimates, which was sort of like a alternate universe take on the Avengers, which was a little more. It was billed as being a little more realistic, a little more cinematic, supposed to feel like a movie. And there's a scene where they're all sitting around talking about who would play them in a movie. And someone actually mentions, I think Tony Stark actually mentions, I think either Johnny Depp or Robert Downey Jr. should play me, which I think is kind of funny. But in that universe, Tony Stark is also very public. Like, people know him as Iron Man. And so it's to me, as a comic book fan, it's signaling that they're taking all of these little cool moments about all these different comic book universes and creating their own thing with it.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
I haven't looked at any of that. Because I have never read any Iron Man comics before I started this show, I figured, I've got 3 movies to kind of do my Iron Man reading. So I've read a good chunk of them, but I still have quite a lot to dig into. So yeah,
go back and look at the Ultimates. That the table scene of them casting each other is particularly great because Nick Fury, he comes in, he's like, well, Sam Jackson would play me, obviously, because the character at the time, they did a black version of Nick Fury instead of the classic comic book, white guy. So yeah, it's very fascinating.
I love that. There is a scene in the script that I wanted to run by you guys that it technically is the end of the movie as it's scripted. And I can't help but feeling like this was potentially an original, like, mid-credit sequence type of scene. Let me just read it to you real quick. It's real brief. Interior, Tony's lab, months later, night. Tony and Rhodey stare at a screen as the War Machine suit is being designed. Rhodey, good, and I want a Gatling gun on the right shoulder. Tony, and a rocket launcher on the left? Where are you going to store all that ammo? Rhodey, whose suit is this anyway? And do it in silver and black, would you? End.
Oh, dear.
A little War Machine scene. Would you guys have liked this? Would it have played okay?
Well, no, I can't say that without like in the absence of what we end up getting in the post-credits. Like, I can't. That's apples and cinder blocks to me. I do like the idea of this kind of a callback, especially because, he says next time, baby, as he looks at the suit, in the beginning of that kind of big third act build. And so I like the idea of that. And it ends up playing nicely with the end title credits where we actually see the Gatling gun on the schematic of the Gatling gun on the shoulder.
I noticed that too.
I think that was really cool. So, I like the idea. I like the idea of being a little bit more aggressive about bringing Rhodey and War Machine into the sort of movie. But as it turns out, I just don't think we need it. And I think what we got was so much better.
Is it needed? No, but as a comic book fan, I would have loved the heck out of it. Of course, I want to see that. And this would have been a good mid-credit stinger, which, interestingly enough, didn't really evolve in these Marvel movies until later on. But I guess they could have set the tone early.
Well, I think for me, I'm like you. I love the idea of this as a scene. I think it would have been really cool to have. But I feel like I don't want to have it with Terrence Howard now, as awkward as that would be. Like I love the idea of him as Rhodey. Like, I'm fine with him as Rhodey in this first film, but really for me, he is not War Machine. War Machine, we're going to get later, and it is going to be perfect. And Terrence Howard is not that War Machine.
Yeah, I think I actually really, when this movie came out, loved the casting of Terrence Howard as War Machine and was very skeptical in Don Cheadle. And Don Cheadle, I think, does a great job. Just because Terrence Howard definitely has that comic book War Machine look compared to Don.
It's not that Terrence Howard couldn't have done it. I think he probably would have been fine. But I think largely it's, a hindsight is 20/20 sort of reaction,
right? Yeah,
because I just think that Don Cheadle is so perfect. It's like I don't.
Yeah, he does a great job.
I think it would be harder for me to watch Iron Man and have this scene with Terrence Howard, like getting his suit built, and then to not have him as in the suit ever would have just made it a weird scene for me.
Yeah.
Well, do you guys have anything else with this movie, or should we talk about some of these credits? We're hitting credits now. These credits are awesome, by the way. How they're stylized, it's so cool. And I love that Marvel continued this trend. Initially, apparently, according to Jon Favreau, they wanted something that was a lot more 3D CG sort of looking. They didn't want these kind of rough sketch sort of drawings that we have here.
Like blueprint?
Yeah. They and he really kind of pushed for these. And I'm glad that he got them, because I just think that they're fun. They feel like something that would be in Tony Stark's computer as he was kind of trying to come up with the design for all of this. It's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the title design is done by Prologue Films, and I'm a big fan of their stuff. And most recently that I have seen them. I mean, they've done a number of title sequences of movies that we've seen and we've talked about on the show. We did the Great Wall. They did the main end titles for the Great Wall, which were beautiful. They were beautiful, but the one that sticks for me is the Star Trek Discovery main titles, which are a real departure. And they're behind that, and it's the same kind of look, right? That sort of blueprinty. We're building a real thing out of a schematic kind of look, and I think it's just it's really great work. I did find a fantastic post, and I'll say fantastic in quotes, that of people on Glassdoor who talk about how terrible they are to work for, which is really sad.
Oh,
that's sad. But my goodness, they've turned out some great work.
They're great to look at here, yeah. And I'm not going to go knocking on their door anytime soon to get a job, but
no,
I do like to look at these credits. They're great.
What do you guys think of the song choice?
So, okay, because at the very beginning of the movie, it was very funny that they didn't go with Black Sabbath to play Iron Man at the beginning. It seemed like kind of like a cheeky way to start by doing Back in Black instead.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of fun. I like that they did that. And then they kick in with Iron Man, but it's an instrumental version. And I actually think it's really cool. I like that they do that it almost feels like it's almost like Tony leading in with the I Am Iron Man, and the music kind of kicks in, and it's just this instrumental that almost feels like it's just for him. I think it's great.
Yeah.
I do too. I think it's fantastic. It's got a ton of energy, and it's one of those that you're already cheering. You know what I mean? Like, it's that line. I'm in my head. I'm one of the press junket. You know, I'm standing up and I'm screaming at this huge news, and that music just keeps me propelled.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sitting there. As I watch this movie, I'm just like, are they going to play the song? Are they going to do it? So it's nice to have that payoff.
I was wondering if they were going to pay it off. I didn't know like much about the Iron Man song that Black Sabbath had written. I knew that there was no connection to the film, but over time, I think just because of the way that the driving sound of this song plays, that it has kind of become intertwined with the character of Iron Man, very unintentionally. This song, the guitar riff, when Ozzy Osbourne first heard the guitar riff at the beginning of the song, he said it sounds like a big iron bloke walking about, and it kind of turned into the song from there. Geezer Butler wrote it as the story of a man who time travels into the future, sees the apocalypse, and then in the process of returning to the present, he's turned into steel by a magnetic field. He's rendered mute, unable verbally to warn people of his time in the future and of impending destruction. His attempts to communicate are ignored and mocked. This causes Iron Man to become angry and drives his revenge on mankind, causing the destruction seen in his vision. I had no idea that was what the song was about.
No. That is a fantastic story. It's like the Cassandra complex in Steel. I love it. That's fantastic. I'm not a big enough fan, apparently.
Let's get a cinematic universe of that.
Yeah. It's one of those songs that I just know the beginning and I know the riffs and kind of the way that it plays, but I don't listen to the words that well, clearly, because I probably would have figured it out. But
that's fascinating.
Yeah. I think that it's important to note that they did not pick Iron Man by Eric Dolphy, the avant-garde jazz musician, or Iron Man by Die Krups, the electro-punk group. Both of them have a song called Iron Man. Nor did they pick anything from Pete Townshend's The Iron Man, the musical that he wrote in the 80s. That was a complete bomb. So I think we can count ourselves lucky that they went with the Black Sabbath version.
Do any of those have a narrative story as good as the Black Sabbath version? I feel like the jury's out until we know what the easy listening version is actually about.
Well, let's just say they definitely are not easy listening. It's very avant-garde jazz, Eric Dolphy's version. It's like a 9-minute just acid jazz sort of song. And I was like, wow, this is not what I want to be listening to. And Die Krups was it was electro-punk, and just it very much feels that way. I didn't listen to anything from Pete Townshend's musical, but I've heard nothing but awful things about it. And despite like having a cast that you like, look at the cast of people that he had in it: Roger Daltrey, Nina Simone, John Lee Hooker. It just says it's failed to come up with a set of compelling melodies. So,
wow.
Yeah. But anyway, we jump into the credits, and so we've got all these fantastic graphics. You did mention the one of War Machine. I guess actually the drawing of that, the way that I understand it, is that was actually something that Tony and Rhodey were going to add to the suit before he went off to fight Obadiah late in the film when Rhodey finds him in his workshop. They were just boosting the suit up to go fight. And I guess by that point, they realized they just need to move the story along. It wasn't necessary, but they kind of kept the drawing and incorporated it there.
That's cool. That's very cool.
That's real cool.
So just talking through some of the credits of Jon Favreau, first up, directed by Jon Favreau. He won an award for this. He won the Saturn Award over at the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films. He won Best Director at the Saturn Awards. He was nominated for the Hugo Awards, Best Dramatic Presentation Long Form. And he was also nominated for, this is a weird one, the Rondo Hatton Classic Horror Awards for Best Film. I don't know how this fits into classic horror.
I'm sorry, the Rondo Hatton?
Yeah.
Who is, or what is Rondo Hatton?
Rondo Hatton, let's see, an American journalist and occasional film actor with a minor career playing thuggish bit and extra parts in Hollywood B-movies, culminating in his elevation to horror movie star status with Universal Studios in the last 2 years of his life, and posthumously as a movie cult icon.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. You go, Rondo Hatton.
His nickname was Rondo the Creeper Hatton.
That sounds like a wrestler.
Yeah,
Totally.
just look him up online. He has a face that fits for horror films. But since 2002, the Rondo Hatton Classic Horror Awards have paid tribute to Hatton in name and likeness. The physical award is a representation of Hatton's face based on the bust of the creeper, whom Hatton portrayed in the 1946 Universal Pictures film House of Horrors.
He looks like the Frankenstein monster guy from The Rocketeer. Is it the same guy?
No, he died in 46.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, then they modeled the Rocketeer guy after him.
He definitely, he's got a kind of a freaky Frankenstein face, so you can see why he took off in that direction.
But he's one of those guys, like I'm looking at a picture of him as a young gentleman, and he is much more handsome. Like in 1913 in his high school yearbook, he's a handsome lad right there. He aged into ghoulish B-movie horror figure. Definitely.
Yes, he did.
Oh, yeah. Rick Baker modeled the Rocketeer big baddie after the creeper. That's interesting.
Oh, look at that. Good call there.
Cool.
Good call.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm a big Rocketeer fan, so.
Nice. Well, we'll have to have you on when we're talking Captain America.
Yeah, there you go. Joe Johnson.
Well, the Rondo Hatton, let's see, the other nominees when Jon Favreau was nominated, he lost to Christopher Nolan for The Dark Knight. So that's who beat him out for that one.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we have the screenplay by Mark Fergus and Hawk Ostby and Art Markham and Matt Holloway, the two writing teams who got the credit. I think we talked about way in the beginning of the show, Pete, the who did get credited and who didn't. We did not get any credits by John August, for example, who did some revisions. And I can't remember who else, but it was one of those movies that had just a laundry list of people at one point who had been attached. They ended up getting, they were nominated at the Saturn Awards for Best Writing. They were nominated also at the Hugo Awards and nominated at the USC Scripter Awards, but they didn't take away any awards for their film. Next up, produced by Avi Arad and Kevin Feige, two big Marvel names. At least at this time, Avi Arad's not quite as connected.
Past and present, I guess.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, Avi separated shortly after this from Marvel, right?
That's what I was going to ask. How many movies did he actually get the credit on? Because it was short.
I believe his name still shows up as an executive producer, but I don't know if he's directly involved.
No, yeah, because he kind of was involved back in the 90s. He was the co-owner of Toy Biz when they ended up taking control over Marvel when Marvel was going through its bankruptcy. They pulled it out of bankruptcy and helped expand it and license it to get more movies going and all that sort of stuff. He separated in 2006, so it was actually before this, but he was still producing features for Marvel.
Looks like he's on The Incredible Hulk, and then he's on producer for, X-Men stuff, Ghost Rider, Spider-Man.
Yeah, it seems like much more of the stuff over on the Fox side of things. Well, Fox and Sony, so he's kind of... It's kind of all over the place, but it seems like he very much is separated from the Marvel proper.
Because he's still very much in as producer and executive producer on the Spider-Man, even Far From Home. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, he just was up there for the Oscar and everything.
And look at what he has coming up, too. Venom 2, Sinister 6, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse 2, Silver Surfer, Prodigal Son, Silver Sable, Kraven the Hunter. He's producer on all of those, and I skipped the ones that I'm actually super excited about. Uncharted and Metal Gear Solid have potential to be some really fun action properties.
Well, he's definitely a producer who is doing stuff beyond Marvel, and that's I think something that really started when he did separate in 2006, starting with Bratz in 2007. He started doing other things, a lot of different type of video game properties and stuff like that, like you were talking about. So yeah, he's an interesting guy, and I know that he still is. As we see, he'll still be involved in Marvel properties, just not necessarily many more of the MCU films.
Right.
Unlike Kevin Nick Fury Feige,
Oh, yes.
of the MCU.
And then there's Kevin.
Yeah.
And then there's Kevin. This, of course, was not his first Marvel credit. His first was back with X-Men. He's an interesting guy. I didn't realize that he came from a family of people in the industry, but his maternal grandfather was a TV producer in the 50s who did soap operas like The Guiding Light and As the World Turns.
God, no wonder I like him so much.
Well, it kind of makes sense, if he's got this TV background, because, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has kind of become a giant television show.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's actually really interesting. And I think he's just the sort of guy who he was a comic lover, and I mean that's really what Avi Arad saw that brought him in, right? I mean, I love this story about him, how he applied to USC before high school actually started. He started applying, and I think it was like every year he applied, and he applied 5 times, getting rejected every time. But it was because all of his favorite directors had gone there, and then finally on his 6th application, he finally got accepted. And then he was kind of an executive producer, an assistant to executive producer Lauren Schuler Donner on Volcano, on You've Got Mail, and then when they were working on X-Men, she made him an associate producer because he knew so much about the Marvel Universe, and that is really what impressed Avi, who brought him in as his second in command at Marvel in that year, in 2000. And then 2007, he was named president of production for Marvel Studios, and this is where we are. This is where we sit now, all because of that.
How do we feel about Kevin Feige? Like, just in general, in terms of his stewardship for comic book lovers who are watching this unveil on the big screen, how do we feel about him?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's great. It's amazing what he's done, with this universe and all these properties, and, the deals he's made to even get ones that weren't under his umbrella originally. So, I mean, this guy, they need to lock him up. I wish they would do what he does with Star Wars, that would be whatever he was able to do. I just think he's the magic maker in my mind.
It would be tricky with Star Wars because Marvel, it's like he's pulling from decades of material. And so
Yeah.
that's the difference there. In Star Wars, they have to find people to kind of create the new vision. And I think that's the challenge is he's really good at finding the properties that have stories that would be interesting to integrate with each other.
That's a good point.
I'm a big fan. I think that he's shown that you can do something like this. You can take these stories and these characters and you can convince these actors to say, you know what, it's going to be a small bit part, but it's going to help kind of create this world that's going to be this bigger thing. And I love that he's been able to kind of lead the charge to do that. And all of these actors who have kind of signed on board to jump in and kind of be a part of this, I think it's just really, really exciting.
Yeah, it's like, how did he convince them? What did he say? Or like, what was his pitch? That's what I've always been curious to know.
Right.
And again, I watch the behind the scenes stuff, and it just feels so legit, the community that they have created out of these major stars, that they still want to come back and do their 6, 10, 15 minutes of screen time and be a part of this community, even in movies where they are not the title character. And I think that is a remarkable thing that they've been able to build over these 22 movies.
They've definitely found people that don't have huge egos where, it's again, going back to Star Wars, it's like, how they had to convince Harrison Ford, picking him up, kicking and screaming to get back into a new Star Wars movies, where it seems like all of these guys, the people that they've casted, this is like, oh yeah, of course. Like it's not a big thing for them.
Do you think some of that is also like Harrison Ford and that whole era of actors, they didn't grow up in a period where you were signing 6 or 9 picture deals. It seems like it's a very different sort of thing. And Harrison also seems like the sort of person that never would have wanted to actually
sign he never would have done that.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, just the movie industry, I think in general, you don't really have that single giant movie star like Harrison was back in his day. Whereas now, it's been these more group efforts.
Right.
We go from this producer credit to executive producers, Louis D'Esposito, Peter Billingsley, Jon Favreau, Ari Arid.
No relation.
The other Jon Favreau or the Ari Arid?
No, the D'Esposito.
So right, so D'Esposito was I didn't know all this. He at the time he was the president of physical production of the studio, and he oversaw the budget and timeline of all Marvel Studios features, including this. And then November 12th, 2009, he was promoted to the co-president of Marvel Studios with Kevin Feige, and he was doing that since 2009, and so that's who that is. Peter Billingsley, I feel like we've talked about back when we did our minute where he appeared. And do you guys know anything about Ari Arid, other than I'm assuming relation to Avi?
Everything I'm looking at is it's such a sparse bio.
Yeah, it feels purposefully sparse.
I mean, I've got a picture of him. He doesn't look like Avi Arad. He is on the Marvel Cinematic Universe fandom wiki, but the extent of his bio says Ari Arad was an executive producer in Iron Man, and that is the end of it. That's the whole thing.
Right.
He's gone on to do Ghost in the Shell, Punisher, Warzone, and Ghost Rider, Nicolas Cage.
Well, then we go to our next executive producer screen with Stan Lee and David Meisel. Stan.
Oh, Stan.
Good old Stan Lee. Yeah, I wonder what his direct involvement, if any, in any of these movies, because he's credited as EP on almost everything or everything.
Oh, boy, let's see. That's a good question. How much is he actually credited on? Well, he's certainly, we never did the IMDb game with Stan Lee, and I feel like we should, although you're both probably staring at his IMDb page right now.
You actually got me right. I'm not looking at it yet. But I was on my way there, Andy.
If you guys had to guess what 4 movies IMDb says Stan Lee is known for, what would be your guess?
Ooh. Oh, I would, let's see. Iron Man for sure.
I think
the first Avengers.
Black Panther, maybe? That was huge.
I just want one of you to say the Trial of the Incredible Hulk.
Definitely I think it's got to be Spider-Man. Maybe the Sam Raimi Spider-Man.
I was going to go there too. Yeah.
Okay.
And let's see, what's one more?
It's a tricky one because he's been in like every Marvel property since they started pretty much. So it's like which
I'll do Captain America, the first Avengers.
Okay.
The New Mutants. Oh wait, that's not out yet. Any X-Men?
Okay, so those are yours?
I feel like we totally crashed and burned on this, and you haven't even told us the truth yet. I don't feel confident about any of these.
Well, you're right. You shouldn't feel confident.
Did we get any of them?
Yeah, did we get any of those?
This is what they are. The 4 are Black Panther, Doctor Strange, Avengers: Age of Ultron, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
What?
Wow.
IMDb is broken.
What the?
How do they come up? I'm always curious about their algorithm and why are these the 4 films that they've picked for Stan Lee? I just don't know.
No Spider-Man? Like that seems like a lock to me.
Yeah, Spider-Man seems to be, it's got to be the number one in Avengers.
Yeah.
It's Captain America, I guess I can understand that was a reach because that was more Jack Kirby. But, oh man.
Ultron I get because that's a good one. I really liked his cameo in that one.
Well, and it's not like, I love Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
I'm trying to remember what his cameo was in that one. Was that one where he's sitting with all the people at the end talking with them?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he's like telling them the stories in the space outfit.
It's not a great cameo. but
no, it's kind of.
But why? What are they? Yeah, I mean, it's cute, but
what was his Black Panther cameo?
I'm trying to remember what his Black Panther cameo was. And what's his Doctor Strange cameo?
Yeah, I don't. Oh wait, no. Was he a patient in the hospital?
The Black Panther cameo. He's in the poker game.
Oh,
and he's not poker. It's
okay.
Blackjack.
He's playing craps, and and he says to Dr. Watson, what's his name? I'll just hold on to these, and takes his chips.
Right.
Yeah.
And Doctor Strange, do you remember that one?
I don't, but I'm so fast. Stanley, Doctor Strange, cameo.
Google food.
Exactly.
Cut this out. Make me look good. Oh, he's on the bus, you guys. How could you forget this? They're in the city fight, and the bus is sideways, and Doctor Strange and Chewie fall, and they land on it sideways, and Stanley is through the window.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Okay.
It's an odd one to pick as one of his cameos.
Yeah, not a great one.
Yeah.
Huh.
What's your favorite Stan Lee cameo?
Ooh. A lot of people are saying they love the Captain Marvel one. I do too, but I wouldn't call it my favorite. I am a little partial to the one here in Iron Man because I just think it's played really nicely, and it was just such a fun surprise.
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know.
Oh,
I also feel like the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man, I kind of like. It's not a big one, but
I might say the trial of the Incredible Hulk, Andy.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you.
I definitely like his Age of Ultron cameo with Cap and the War Buddies. I think that's a good one.
That's a nice one. That one just feels really authentic. I like that one.
Yeah.
Well, it's Spider-Man 2. He saves a pedestrian from falling rocks.
Yep.
That's right.
There's some good ones. I actually also kind of liked his one in Incredible Hulk, which we'll talk about next year, which is kind of really a strange one where he's drinking like the tainted soda.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And he faints or something.
I like that one.
I want to know more. Well, do you guys know anything about David Mizell, the guy he's credited with as an executive producer?
I do not.
I don't either. And I'm always curious, like, why do some of these people get paired when they're credited together like this? I don't know enough about who this David Mizell is. But yeah, another executive producer on this. And not always Marvel films, but certainly he did this, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, the First Avenger, and then a big jump to the Angry Birds movie.
Oh.
Like he was doing a great job with Phase 1, and then the Angry Birds movie.
You found something better.
I don't know where that right turn came from, but it certainly is there.
Hey, maybe it was top of the Angry Birds craze. He thought he was onto something there.
Right. Hey, they're making a second one, so I can't argue the financial success. Oh, yes.
Man.
Oh, yes.
Maybe big in China or something.
It's big somewhere. All right, director of photography, Matthew Libatique. We've talked about Matty and his work quite a bit. Great job in this film. It's not like his top caliber, like what you've seen in some of his bigger films, but I think for what he was doing here, I think he does a great job. I think there's some fun nods to, as we've called out, like some nods to Star Wars and the Sam Raimi works and things like that. I think that they really were having fun with it.
Yeah.
And then production design, J. Michael Riva, with just a beautiful work all through creating the whole world of Tony Stark. I think it all looks really nice here.
Well, and some great choices around integrating, real properties with, the universe of Tony Stark. I think it's really good stuff.
And a good integration with the military. I thought they did that really nicely.
Yeah.
He and his team did get a nomination at the Art Directors Guild Excellence in Production Design for a fantasy film, but they did not end up taking it home. Dan Leventhal, the editor on this, was nominated by the Hollywood Post Alliance for Outstanding Editing of a Feature Film. And at the Satellite Awards, he won for Best Film Editing. I think Dan did a great job with the editing throughout. I think kept this film very, very tight and cut out those deleted scenes that we definitely didn't need.
And has done a lot. He's been involved in a lot of subsequent Marvel films. And so it's neat to see him continue to work in the universe too. Yeah,
certainly. John Nelson, visual effects supervisor. This is where the film really excels, is the visual effects. And I think it's a standout film in that regard. And it speaks by the awards nominations. Academy Award Best Achievement in Visual Effects nomination, the BAFTA Awards Best Visual Effects, Saturn Award Best Visual Effects, Golden Derby Award Visual Effects, Hollywood Film Awards Visual Effects of the Year, winner, the Online Film and Television Association Best Visual Effects, Satellite Best Visual Effects, St. Louis Film Critics Association Best Visual Effects. And then at the Visual Effects Society Awards, nominated for 2 awards, Outstanding Visual Effects in an Effects-Driven Feature, motion picture and best single visual effect of the year. It only took home the one win, but a lot of nominations, really kind of pointing to the solid work all through. What did you guys think of the visual effects throughout this film?
Yeah, I think, rewatching it recently, it really still, it holds up very well, effects-wise, except for a few shots here or there. And I think the use of a lot of practical effects with the suits really nails that authenticity.
I totally agree. The thing that I like the most when we started this movie, the critics of some of these Marvel movies, at least some of the critical commentary is, it's just, what we've said, time and again is, it's just, fake things throwing things at fake things. And some of the Marvel movies have kind of launched in that direction. Infinity War is, a lot of visual effects, like 150 straight minutes of visual effects work.
Yeah.
And I think this movie, I just don't think you can say that. And if there's anything that I feel like I've come away from the experience of looking at this movie 1 minute at a time, it is that the number of minutes of fake things, literally throwing things at fake things, I think it's like 4. I think it's 4 minutes of stuff that is just straight up, digital characters throwing other things, and that's the stuff that I think is, is overblown by critics of all of the films. When you look at this film, it is so grounded, and that is, such credit to the visual effects teams that make the otherwise, visual effects look so subtle and grounded in the world. And do it so well. I think this movie is a real standout.
And it invents the whole, like, that heads-up display view, which I think is a amazing and very clever way to get the actors a lot of screen time, but then in other shots have the superheroes wear their damn masks, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Because that always drove me nuts about, like, Spider-Man, the Sam Raimi versions, is that he's always finding an excuse to take his mask off, and Spider-Man would never do that.
Right.
Yeah, it is a very effective way. Still doesn't work for Spider-Man. He still doesn't, it's hard to put a HUD in his little pullover mask. But for Iron Man, it is awesome, and it's brilliantly done. Next up, we have costume designers Laura Jean Shannon and Rebecca Benchen. They were nominated for the Costume Designers Guild Awards Excellence in Contemporary Film. But they were nominated. They did not win. But, the costumes, I think, look nice. Everything works really effectively. I'm always torn. Like, do they consider? I kind of don't think they consider any of the suits part of the costume.
That's what I was wondering.
I feel like that's part of. It's really kind of the Stan Winston design and kind of builds that they were doing. So I don't think it ends up falling into the costumes. So I think it's just the rest of all the costumes, like the fancy suits that Tony's always wearing.
Yeah, which are
the stuff that
fine.
Yeah, I think to that end, all of that I think works. Associate producer Jeremy Latcham. And then we have music by Ramin Djawadi. Ramin was nominated for a Saturn Award for Best Music. The ASCAP Film and Television Music Awards, he got an award because the film was one of the top box office films. And at the Grammys, Best Score, Soundtrack, Album for Motion Picture, Television, or Other Visual Medium nomination. Did not take it. How does the score hold up for you after all these years, Nick?
I think that's the one area still where Marvel is severely lacking. Is it's very forgettable. The original score, as far as the soundtrack is concerned, like when they've actually put in, other artists' music, I think that works really well. In this movie, especially with AC/DC and Iron Man, Black Sabbath. But as far as original score goes, it's very bland, very, very forgettable. And I think that's something that's plagued almost every Marvel film, save for the Avengers.
I was just going to say that. Like, you asked me what the theme is for this movie, and I hummed it in my head, and it's the Avengers theme.
Yeah.
It's the only one I know, right?
There are a few that I think do stand out. I think Doctor Strange is another one that I think it's a brilliant score.
Yeah.
And weirdly, Thor, I think Patrick Doyle had some nice themes for Thor, but I do agree largely that Marvel really still suffers from strong thematic ties in their music. It just, I don't know why. And Ramin Djawadi is an interesting choice, and I certainly enjoy the music. Like, I think that the electric guitar, the kind of the driving theme for Iron Man, it's nice. nice, but it's brief and it doesn't you don't walk away singing it really. I mean, maybe you're like, da-na-na-na, sort of stuff, but it's not like you don't really feel like there's that John Williams feel with the music.
Yeah, like, Superman. Everybody knows what John Williams' score with Superman sounds like, or even Danny Elfman's Batman, who did the Dark Knight trilogy? That score.
Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard.
What's so interesting about Ramin Djawadi is that he has absolutely written, themes like that, right? I mean, you ask me to hum a Ramin Djawadi thing, and I immediately go to, Game of Thrones or Westworld. Yeah. I mean, those are properties of his that demonstrate exactly this kind of skill. And I think the Iron Man movie, the theme Iron Man got in the way of
it's like, how do you top that? Maybe
how do you top that?
Well,
right?
and I think part of it is Jon Favreau had always worked with John Debney, and even after this, he'll work with John Debney on Iron Man 2. But John Debney ended up having like 4 films that he was scoring this same year. So it was unavailable. And Ramin Djawadi actually knew this was happening, and he's a huge fan of Iron Man. And so he actually sought out the production, and they'd finished filming it. They were still editing it, but he started playing with the ideas just after seeing a trailer and stuff. And because his time constraints were really short on this, they didn't have a lot of time to do it. And so he ended up having to get some help with some of the arranging and stuff from Hans Zimmer and from the remote control team. And so I think also that doesn't help, unfortunately. I like that he was a fan, but also it's just one of those things where they don't have a lot of time to do much with it. And it just leaves you in a state where you get some good themes that work well in context of the scenes they're in, but nothing that ends up being very memorable, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So that's Ramin Djawadi. Then we go to music supervisor Dave Jordan. And casting by Sarah Halley Finn and Randy Hiller. They were nominated for Casting Society of America Artios Award for Outstanding Achievement in Casting for a Studio Feature. I don't know. Personally, I feel like this film is made on the casting that we got here, and I feel like it helped set up the MCU. What we got out of this film, and so to me, I kind of feel like it's a winner. It lost to No Country for Old Men, but that's a tough one.
If only they knew.
Yeah, right. Well, that's kind of the end of today's credits. Do you guys have anything else about any of these credits, or should we just wait till we can talk more credits tomorrow?
What a cliffhanger!
Yeah, we're gonna end on some more credits.
What comes after casting?
I know. Ending on casting.
We'll get standard credits. This has got to be the end of the stylized, right? Or is there still?
No, we're not quite at the end of the stylized. We'll get a little bit more of the stylized tomorrow. So.
Well, sounds good.
Awesome. Well, Nick, would you like to remind everybody where they can find you out there online?
Yes. Go to www.fantasyflixleague.com. That's FLIX. It's fantasy football for indoor kids. It's where you can play something like fantasy football, but with movies. And if you don't know what fantasy football is, we have a great tutorial on our homepage, which will teach you all about the game and how to play. We also have a podcast, the Fantasy Flix League podcast. We sort of break down box office, talk upcoming attractions and trailers, and really kind of deep dive into the game and how the game is played to kind of give you a leg up on the competition.
Fantastic. Well, check that out, everybody. In the meantime, that's it for today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to the show for free at marvelmovieminute.com. Join us over in our Discord chat room and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Next Reel. And if you like what we do and you want to support us and get some cool stuff, become a patron over at thenextreel.com/Patreon. Until next time, true believers,